And we're back. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 15 of Friday Live. And good golly, Miss Molly, have we got some news for you this week? We have a new member of the Hodinkee team with us. I'd like to waste no time in introducing you to someone who many of you probably already know from his previous work as a watch writer, longtime traveling companion of both Mr. Benjamin Clymer and myself, someone with whom we've stolen a few horses over the years, as they say, Mr. Jonathan Buse, who joins us as senior editor. And John, please...
Thanks, guys.
What have you got for the home audience?
Well, I just want to introduce myself, John Buse. I'm really happy to be here. I've known Ben for about, I think, 9 years, and maybe Jack for even a little bit longer. Yeah. And I've watched Hodinkee go from strength to strength over the time that I've known these guys. And, I think, in my point of view, these guys are, the leading team in horological journalism, and I'm really happy to be part of this winning team.
All right. We're very, very happy to have you. Actually, just a little personal note. The first story that I ever wrote professionally as a watch writer, I think John actually edited. This is so long ago that neither of us wants to remember how many years it was. I think that's actually true.
I vaguely remember it being an extremely technical piece, I think on some AP caliber or another. And I was very young at the time. I was maybe 22, and I recall thinking, am I really qualified to be editing this story?
The answer is clearly no.
All right, so for this episode, we decided to do something a little different and something that we hope you'll all enjoy. One of the things that we have noticed over the last 15 or so episodes is that there's a lot more curiosity from our readers, a lot more questions than we generally have a chance to address at the end of each segment. So what we decided to do was a sort of our version of an Ask Us Anything. And we've been taking questions from you folks since yesterday afternoon. And we will try to get to as many of them as possible. And boy, oh boy, as I said before, good golly, Miss Molly, you guys have a lot of questions. So we'll do everything we can to answer as wide a variety as possible. And if for some reason we can't get to yours, which just simple statistics says we might not, because there's several hundred at this point, we will do everything we can to answer them either in subsequent episodes or in the comments section. So, John, you want to lead off?
Sure, yeah. So we're going to kick off with the questions now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. My question that I'm answering is about watch etiquette. It says, are there any watch manners or tips that you wish more people knew, or things that really bug you? For me, this is when you're at a trade show or when you're just trying on watches with friends and somebody already has a watch on and they decide they're going to try on another watch right next to it. This really this galls me because I'm terrified that my watch is going to get scratched or that someone else's watch is going to get scratched. So please don't do that. Take it off or put it on your right wrist or whichever wrist happens to be empty.
Yeah.
Fair.
Great answer. Yeah, and I think one of the things that all of us have seen are a sort of inexplicably careless handling of not only people's own watches, but other people's watches.
Yeah, I think it falls under that umbrella. Just treat it like it was your own.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you guys think about the sex pile thing?
I mean,
You guys all know what that is, right? Yeah. I'm getting some chuckles here from people that I don't think know what that is. It's when everybody throws their watches on the table and take an Instagram or whatever, which has become pretty popular,
right?
And it's cool,
right.
But could damage the watch.
There's always a potential for damage when there's metal against metal. Personally, it makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, and the bell from It's Card Time says, time to move on.
Okay.
My turn. So the question is, what is the watch that got away, an auction you lost, a special edition that got away, or otherwise? So I try not to dwell on the past too much, because there's always something ahead of us that will give you joy. There are two moments where there's one moment where I wish I could have bought a watch and couldn't, and another where I owned a watch and sold it and now regret it. Both of them happen to be Daytonas. I know that's really boring, but both of them happen to be Daytonas. About 4 years ago, a man, I think in Indiana or Washington, D.C., somewhere said, hey, my father-in-law has this great Daytona, we have it, it's been in the family, whatever. He used to be a race car driver. What do we do with it? And I see this watch, and it was a double Swiss underline, and it was amazing. It was the original owner. This guy was a race car driver, and I just didn't have the money to buy it. I just couldn't do it, and so I said, you know what? I just can't do it right now, so it is what it is. He ended up selling that watch to Philip Stahl from Rolex Passion Report. It ended up being a pretty historically important Daytona, also one of the first. Really regret not being able to buy that one. Yeah. Second one, I know I have 10 seconds, is a gold Daytona that I did own, and I ended up selling to a friend of mine because I wanted to buy something else that I have surely sold many times over at this point, and he won't sell it back.
Oh,
I know.
Yeah. Well, can you blame the guy?
No, I can't.
All right, I think I'm up next. The this was an interesting question for a number of reasons. Here we go. Collectors often say things like, that we know of, and we don't know how many. When talking about vintage makes and models, it seems to me that there ought to be a definitive list of output by these meticulous companies that would say for sure what watches are or are not out there. Is there, and if so, is it a matter of the companies being tight-lipped that this is not public knowledge, or are they just like messing around with this? So my quick answer to that, and I think this is something that you guys could probably speak to as well. The Swiss watch manufacturers were surprisingly not so concerned during the heyday of Swiss watch manufacturing with keeping meticulous records so that collectors could do forensics in the coming decades.
Correct.
On what is and what is not out there.
Yeah, these were just things, They never, Rolex surely never thought a steel Daytona would be worth $1 million. It was just a watch,
Right.
Nothing more than that. So why pay attention to the minutia?
Right.
Yeah.
And with the exception of very few companies like Patek Philippe or Vacheron Constantin, which did engage in pretty meticulous record keeping.
Yeah.
I think AP has pretty extensive archives as well.
Yeah, the big three.
Yeah.
But it was just not a priority for them. And during the quartz crisis, let's not forget, a lot of these factories sold down, and records were hauled away and dumped into landfill in droves. So we're left with a situation where, even in principle, we can't verify the number of watches from many, many brands that were made.
Oh. All right. Okay, for my next question, someone asks, you have only $500, what do you buy? My answer is I'd go for like an East German GUB Spezzimatic. I know we're not talking about anything of tremendous quality here, but I think you get a pretty sweet design and something very exotic for a small amount of money. So that's what I think I would go for.
So not a Seiko?
Maybe, well, now that you mentioned that, yeah.
Oh yeah, that.
Yeah, maybe an old Grand Seiko. Those perhaps still can be had on eBay. Yeah.
I mean, pretty much for me, any one of the many, many, many great Seikos under $500 would probably be anything from a 5 to a Presage to whatever. But there's so much out there. But I think the Spezzimatic is a really, really interesting
Agreed.
choice, and people don't talk about those all that much nowadays.
No, they don't. No. They're exotic,
Yeah. I mean, the only place I've ever seen them for sale is in
Dresden.
Dresden,
Yeah.
actually.
Right,
Same.
yeah. I mean, and they're all over eBay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're too.
Yeah.
Dresden and eBay.
Dresden.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Next question. So do you think that the upcoming auction of the Paul Newman personal Daytona will have an impact on the lesser exotic 6263 Big Red and other less significant Daytonas? Yes. About it.
All right.
I mean, of course it will. The Lesson 1 Daytona in 2013 had a huge impact on the values of Daytonas. There's no question that this will be a watershed moment for the watch collecting world. I've already seen an uptick in demand for the 6239 Daytona, which traditionally speaking is like the lowest Paul Newman on the totem pole. Now they're super hot. They used to trade for around 100 and change. Now they're like 160, 170. I mean, in the Paul Newman and in the Daytona world, I still think we've got a long way to go. I know the prices are already insane, but I think we've got a long ways to go.
And how much of a problem do you think, we were talking about record keeping, and Rolex, of course, does not verify the authenticity
Correct.
of vintage Daytonas. How much of a problem do you see that in terms of creating a cap for where vintage Paul Newmans can go?
I don't think that there is a cap. I think we've gotten this far, and we're already, Daytonas are selling for $3 million. They're already going that far without having any confirmation from Rolex.
So if it was going to be a problem.
Correct. And to be clear, they won't give you any letterhead or documentation, but if you give them a watch for service, they will look at it and they will tell you if the style is not correct or original.
Right.
Okay.
So, interesting. Okay. Let's see. What would your respective careers be? I feel this isn't just a question for me, obviously. What would your respective careers be if getting into the watch industry never happened, and what watches would you be wearing at your job?
That's a good question.
Ben?
So I would probably still be working in like project management or consulting. I'd probably still be wearing the one Omega that my grandfather had given me, or maybe a Maurice Lacroix. I had a Maurice Lacroix back in the day that I bought at Tourneau.
No kidding.
True story. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, it's hard to imagine my life not in this world after I've been doing this for so long. But yeah, I would probably, an Omega or Rolex, pretty standard stuff, I would think.
Like, there's two sides to that question. There's what would you be doing, and then the two watch questions are what watch would you be wearing if you were into watches, and what watch would you be wearing if you weren't?
Correct.
Yeah.
How about you, John?
For me, well, I mean, I came to watches through magazines. That was my interest, journalism. So I'd probably be working at another magazine. It's hard to say at this point in my career exactly where I'd be, but hopefully I'd have risen up through the ranks enough that I'd be wearing a nice watch, and I would have been reading Hodinkee and maybe something nice, maybe a Rolex.
I mean, I like to think that I would definitely still be writing. I don't know what kind of writing I would be doing, but that's almost certainly it. And I hope that I would be successful enough at it that I would be wearing a 36mm yellow gold day-date.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. My next question. Do you think Longines will ever make the 13ZN-12 center-minute chronograph in their heritage line? It's my favorite watch design ever made, and the size is obviously relevant today. I would say this is very unlikely, but I welcome both of your opinions too. I think Longines is a very different kind of watch company now than they were when they made that watch. So I just don't see that happening. I could be wrong, but I think the closest current production chronograph out there to that you could find would be like a datograph.
Right. Yeah, I'm in total agreement. Like Longines now it's an entry level kind of mass
different.
consumer brand. I mean, they're making watches by the boatload. Back then, they were making very few. Not going to happen. That said, they could revive that kind of technology or that platform. Maybe put it in a Breguet. I mean, it's all Swatch. It's a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing watch, but certainly, as you both said, completely different company at this point. Yeah. And I think the chances of that particular watch being, made with modern technology and manufacturing, as it was then, it's essentially, as you say, it's essentially zero.
Cool. Next question. When you all first started your collections, what were the biggest mistakes / regrets you made? And what steps did you all take to become more knowledgeable and thoughtful as you learn more about collecting and horology? Jack, please.
Well, when I first started collecting back when dinosaurs ruled the earth, I was buying broken American-made pocket watches for like less than $20 usually at the 26th Street Flea Market back when there was one, and I was taking them home to repair. So the biggest mistake I made wasn't collecting necessarily. It was I didn't know as much as I thought I did about watchmaking, and I caused some fortunately reversible but unnecessary damage to the first couple of watches that I worked on. So I wish I'd gone a little bit more slowly. I was impatient.
Yeah.
Well, like I said earlier, I came to watches through magazines, and I pretty much learned I was started as a copy editor at IW, and I learned a lot of what the bedrock of what I know, just copy editing that magazine for a period of years, reading every single issue cover to cover multiple times. Mistakes that I made, I mean, I think I bought some watches that I never wear anymore, and they just sit around. I regret some purchases. I won't name names, but that's it.
Name one name.
I really don't want to.
One really big name. And oh man, I didn't get it. You sure? They're saying I can answer. You positive? Okay.
Well, yeah.
So I learned about watches by reading auction catalogs and going to auctions in New York. Mostly Antiquorum at first. That was kind of the first auction house I connected with on a personal level. Started going to those auctions, reading every catalog, going to the previews and like touching everything. Even though I couldn't afford or was even going to write anything about most of the watches, they would allow me to pick them up and play with them, and that teaches you a lot. The other thing I'll say is that you shouldn't be afraid to buy something and then sell it. I have a few friends in the industry that kind of view watches as a much more emotional thing. Say, oh, you buy a watch, you have to keep it for the rest of your life. I do have that sentiment towards some watches, but others, it's just a fun thing, and I don't think you really can understand a watch and how much you'll appreciate it until you own it. So I would say you have to be okay with like buying this watch and selling it.
So you essentially, there's a certain level on which you really don't know how you're going to react to a watch until the time that you're an owner.
Correct.
You have the ownership experience, and that's when you can actually make a full evaluation.
Absolutely, and I've purchased many watches that I thought I would just adore, and then just didn't for whatever reason.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's.
Watches that we own, should we go over what's on our wrist?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay. So let's pivot a little bit from our questions, and we're going to talk very quickly about what we have on our wrists this week. Ben, you want to lead off?
Sure. So what I'm wearing today is a Longines, in fact. This is a slim, manually wound Calatrava style watch dating to 1945. It is, in fact, the inspiration for the watch that the Longines revived this year. So I've owned this watch for about 3 years, 3 or 4 years. I bought it on 47th Street, no lie. The case is spectacular, really flat bezel, kind of a curved salmon dial. The watch is amazing, it really is. I've been wearing it on one of our suede straps since the day I bought it. And not long ago, or about, I should say a year ago, Longines reached out and said, hey, somebody from our product team saw this watch on Instagram, can we borrow it? And I said, sure, whatever. So I gave it to him, and then a year goes by, and then lo and behold, at Basel this year, we have this very watch made into a production piece, which is wonderful. It's a really great watch. It's a watch that I think speaks a lot to the history of the brand, and really is a lovely and charming watch without having to be, the new piece anyway, without being very expensive or very rare. You'll be able to buy it at any Longines retailer.
Yeah.
So it's a great watch.
I have here the Autavia 2017, which readers will remember as the winning watch from the Autavia Cup that took place last year. This is a watch that I've already written about 3 times, and I'll do it a 4th time for a week on the wrist, which I have coming up. I'm really excited about that. And it got me thinking that, whenever I write about a watch multiple times, it's something that I would I would definitely consider buying for myself, and I would put this watch in that category. I would say my one little cavil about this watch is that it's a little bit thick at 15 millimeters. But in terms of value, you have the Heuer O2 in-house movement. You have what I consider to be a great design, and it's only $51.50 on a strap, or with a really great bracelet, which unfortunately I don't have it on now. The Beads of Rice bracelet, $5,300. But you'll get to hear more of my thoughts about it when I finally do the week on the wrist.
Nice. So no spoilers, but you're
No
into it.
spoilers, yeah.
I have a really interesting watch. This is and one of the largest watches I think I've ever reviewed. It's a Favre Luba.
It's tough.
Can you say that slower, please?
I sat with Louis trying to figure out how to pronounce this correctly, and I tried 6 times, and he just kept going, no. But that's my shot. Favre Luba, which is a company a lot of vintage watch collectors know. They did one of the very first watch, I think the first watch with a depth gauge, and one of the first watch, and I think the first watch with an altimeter as well back in the 1960s. And recently resurrected. The company kind of went away during the quartz crisis. This particular watch is pretty extreme. If you are into dive watches that are sort of over-engineered, and that's the thing that appeals to you, it's definitely worth considering. 500 meters water resistant. Case is 46 millimeters by 16.5 millimeters. It's very angular and chunky. It has a helium escape valve, which no one except a saturation diver in a dry decompression chamber needs. But if life were about what we need instead of what we want, lots of great things wouldn't exist. And the most interesting thing about it is it has a mechanism for telling the time, where you have this rotating hour ring that kind of follows the minute hand around the dial, and at the top of each hour, the minute hand is pointing to the correct hour. At the top of the next hour, the minute hand is again pointing to the next subsequent hour. And Favre Luba has a patent for this particular mechanism built on a Sellita base. $4,700, very cool watch and worth considering if you want a massively over-engineered dive watch under $5,000.
Sweet.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Should we kick it back to the questions?
Let's do it.
Yeah, question time? All right, let's do it.
Where did we leave off?
Who was last?
I'll do it.
Okay.
The question is, why don't they make them like they used to?
Well, that raises the question: how did they make them?
They
like they
don't
used
have to. They just don't. I'm kind of serious about that. I think like watch consumers for the longest time over the past 10, 15 years, really were kind of accepting of all things in many ways. I would say, with Chinese tourism, the kind of gifting culture, things like that. People were selling stuff that just, it was just a watch, and whatever the brands would pump out there, people would just consume. And so the Swiss didn't have to make anything that was particularly thoughtful or tasteful. That's one idea. I don't know, Jack. What do you think?
I mean, I think that we look at the past through rose-colored glasses, but the truth is, there was a time when everyone pretty much had to have a wristwatch if you wanted to be able to tell the time. And it's also true that people got, in general, the best quality watch that they could afford, but getting a really great watch and making sacrifices for it was simply not a priority for most folks.
Right.
So yeah, 100%, there were a lot of beautiful, thoughtfully made watches, back in the day. Right. But there were also a ton of mediocre ones,
Absolutely.
that's something that we forget. You go look around for vintage watches on eBay, and there's a ton of stuff there that is just as lackadaisical and forgettable in design as.
But do you think that's changing though? Do you think?
I do. I think it's via platforms like Instagram, sites like ours, and of course many others.
Yeah.
People have a different expectation of quality and taste and design now than they did, I would say, 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think the acceleration in pricing has been a problem.
Correct. That's a whole other conversation.
Oh, yeah.
The one thing I will say that, like blanket statement, watches are superior today. Technically speaking, they will last much, much longer. As products, they are stronger today.
Yeah, better lubricants, better seals, better gaskets, better metallurgy, the whole 9 yards.
For sure.
Tell me about the lubricants.
Oh, that's a book.
That's another story.
That's a book. A very, very boring book. Am I up?
I think you are.
Let's see, where
Or I can go if you want.
Yeah, okay.
What's the difference between, I'm sorry, I skipped one. There's been some discussion about watches finally starting to get smaller. I haven't seen much of this happening. What do you think? Will 40 millimeters or less become the new norm? If yes, when? I think that's a good question, and I happen to agree with what you're asserting there. I haven't seen much evidence of that happening either. Where we have seen it happen, it's typically been with like vintage-inspired models using older movements. I think you have to remember that tooling up and developing new movements is a major investment. It takes a lot of time to do, and for a long time, large movements were what was in for new production watches. So if it does come around, it'll take a little time. For now, we're stuck with a lot of big movements and watches
Exactly.
in cases that need to fit them. You know?
Yeah, so here's the problem. During the time when a lot of companies made major investments in producing in-house movements because it was a way of distinguishing themselves, bigger watches were also in. And if you've got a 36 millimeter movement, it's hard to put it in a 36 millimeter case.
Yeah, doesn't work.
Yeah, I think what you guys said is completely apt. The other thing I'll say is, like, again, most people that might read this site and similar sites really want small watches. People at scale don't. People that want to sell watches every day. Breitling is, even though it's gone through some transitions recently, it's still a very popular brand. People want bigger watches.
Yeah. All right. I thought this was an interesting question because it's something that I've been thinking about since I was a 6-year-old science fiction fan. You've been given the opportunity to travel back in time in order to change the course of watchmaking history forever. There's a lot of other things I would change too. You can only bring one watch to demonstrate the horological engineering and manufacturing capabilities of the future. What watch would you bring? Now, I don't know whether this is one that it depends on how far back in time you go.
Yeah.
But the watch that I would bring just to show people, say around Breguet's time, how much watchmaking technology has changed, would probably be a tough solar triple sensor G-Shock. What it does is something that a scientist of Breguet's time would understand. They would understand the concept of temperature, barometric pressure, and the operation of a compass. But it would be so completely disconnected from any of the watchmaking technology of their time. I think their jaws would drop.
Yeah.
And they'd want to come back with me.
Perhaps this is kind of a facile answer, but I would say that I would just bring back a watch with some silicium components and show them to Breguet and say, you don't need the perfect oil anymore. The component is the oil itself.
Yeah, what do you think, Ben?
Those are both wonderful answers. I think a lot of it would have to kind of depend on what mood I was in that day. But a datograph, just in terms of the aesthetic finishing, I think the idea that everything you said was completely great. But the idea of that level of attention to detail just to finishing, to architecture, that's one thing. Mr. Breguet would certainly be fascinated by it, but to spend that much time on just the aesthetics of it, I think is something that would impress them.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, finishing watches to that high a level of aesthetics is a really major transition in traditional watchmaking because that was absolutely not a priority for most watches back in the day. All right.
Okay.
Okay. What's the difference between heat bluing hands versus chemical bluing? Take, for example, the Seiko Cocktail Time that Jack reviewed this week. Is that chemically blue? Are there any advantages over traditional heat bluing? I think chemical bluing is done in a chemical bath. You take the screw or the hands or whatever component you're talking about, and you just immerse it in that, and it happens. Heat bluing is done either with fire, which would be more unusual, or with just a very hot surface, a hot metal surface that you put the component on and it blues. It can be a little tricky though, because if you leave it on too long, then it can blue too much, or it can even distort the material itself.
Yeah, the traditional way to do heat bluing, and Roger Smith still does this, he's one of the very few people I know who does, is you put the component in a little copper pan and you heat it over a flame, and the flame has to be completely even, no drafts, or the bluing won't be consistent. So it's really a whole little world of craftsmanship in itself.
Is there anybody better than Roger?
No.
Better? I'm struggling with that one.
Yeah. Next question. Name the brands that you think have turned it around the most in recent years. Jack.
Oh gosh. In recent years, that is actually a tough one because the answer would have been very different 3 years ago. I think turning it around is, you think of what's a brand that was in trouble and is has really started to do consistently better aesthetically, in terms of communication, in terms of design and technically. And I think that there are so many currents kind of pushing against every single watch brand right now that seeing somebody who's a real turnaround king is difficult, just because times are so tough.
Yeah.
The last 2 years have been very, very difficult for the watch industry. So I think, I think that continuing to do well commercially is tough, and those companies that are doing that are the ones that, under better circumstances, you might describe as turnaround kings and queens.
Sure.
Yeah. I would say, not that they were ever really in need of a turnaround, but I think Omega has just been so impressive in kind of how they've harnessed technology and really been a leader in sports watches in their price category, I would say.
Yeah. I was about to say Omega.
Okay, sorry.
I've chatted about them on Friday Live in the past. I think they're really strong, and they're only getting stronger each year. I think TAG as well.
Yeah,
doing some nice
I
stuff.
agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. This was an interesting one to me because it's something that I struggled with many years ago when I first started going to watch gatherings. Meetups. I've been collecting for a few years and want to go to watch meetups, Red Bar, etc., but I really don't know how or where to get involved in the community. Meetups are intimidating. How do newer collectors get started in what seems like a great way to go deeper and learn more? I mean, I would say, go ahead and reach out to, us, reach out to,
Sure.
whatever, we do events on a fairly regular basis. Reach out to Red Bar.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you'll find that most of these, watch collecting is still a pretty small community in the great scheme of things. And despite the kind of acrimonious nature of the comments that you see sometimes in, to our articles or other people's articles, or on forums, once you get face to face with other watch guys and gals, it's really it's a very friendly, very welcoming environment. And as long as you come with curiosity and an open mind, and a willingness to find out things that you didn't find out, which I always do, certainly when I go to these things. I think you're going to have a great time, and you're going to find it's a pretty welcoming environment.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid.
I agree 100%. When I do go to some meetups, not as often as I wish I could, but when I'm there, I often see people who have very very basic watches, people who are very new to the hobby, and they're always welcome. Can a 20-something pull off a JLC Reverso? I have typically seen these on older gentlemen's wrists. Would it be too out of place on my 23-year-old wrist? I say why not? I think, if I'm not mistaken, this watch is often gifted as a graduation gift in France. So, go for it. Why not?
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you like the watch and you think it looks good, do it. I bought a Reverso when I was 26.
Yeah.
I still have it. I love it.
Yeah. So go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very beautiful, very stylish, slightly rakish watch, I think. It's got great, dash to it, a lot of style. And I don't think that age is a factor at all in whether or not you can pull it off.
Agreed.
Yep.
Terrific piece.
Cool.
Thoughts on live Q&A, gentlemen?
Let's do it.
Shall we? Live Q&A. Okay, let's see what we got. Oh boy. What are your opinions on older quartz watches from the 1970s? I'm thinking that the older ones compare favorably to the newer ones. However, quartz tech has moved so far in the past decades, maybe I should just stay with the newer ones from Citizen and Seiko. Well, quartz is a subject that so many Hodinkee readers, yeah. 2 years ago we did Quartz Week. It was an interesting experience.
It was.
It's it's a thing that people love to hate, but it's its own very niche, admittedly, area of what's already a very niche subject. But there's a lot of sort of scientific interest and design interest in some of these watches. Companies were experimenting with different frequencies, accuracy had taken a quantum leap forward. And if that's if exploring that world is the kind of thing that floats your boat, and there's no reason why it shouldn't. I would say definitely, and certainly the price is right for most of them. I mean, unless you're getting into super rare, some of the super rare baited 21s are a little expensive, but not even that.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? Buy what you like. Jack mentioned companies experiencing with different frequencies. Maybe go for an old GP Laureato or something. Could be fun.
One very quick one that I think we're in a position to address. Where is Kara?
She's actually right there.
Right over there.
Hey, Kara. She's manning the bell currently. Yeah. That is Kara.
That's Kara.
Yeah.
So she's with us not only in spirit but in the flesh, just off camera with a bell, keeping us on time. Let's see. What's the best way to convince my parents to allow me to buy more watches?
That's a tough one.
I don't know your parents.
Yeah. I'd take out the trash on a regular basis. Don't forget to mow the lawn. Stay in school. Don't do drugs. What else? Quit smoking if you started. Don't start if you haven't. What do you think about those watch certification companies? I was thinking of getting my watch certified.
Well, it depends. It depends on who we're talking about, of course, but I don't think much of them, I guess. I don't know what tangible benefit they have. This is not like Kelley Blue Book. This is not like a certificate from a manufacturer themselves. In many cases, the people that are doing the certification don't know any more about the watch than you would with a little bit of research. So if you're paying for that, I wouldn't be so keen on it. If it's something that is a value add, sure.
Yeah. All right, do we have time for a couple more? Yeah. All right, let's do it. How are gold watch cases like the Nomos Lux created, and how are they made strong enough to withstand the rigors of daily life given the softness of gold as a material? So, basically gold cases come in two flavors, basically they come in 14 karat or 18 karat gold. And gold is a shiny, soft, ductile metal, as Wikipedia says. And it's inherently more scratchable, it's inherently more dentable. Gold watches are typically worn more carefully by their owners than sports watches. So I think the answer is, gold kind of is what it is materials-wise, but people come at it a little bit differently than they would a steel sports watch when they wear it. And it's not uncommon to see gold watches from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, if they were worn carefully, they hold up pretty well over time.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, no watches are solid gold, right? These are all alloys, so they're not as soft as people would think they are.
Yeah. I mean, a 24 karat, pure 24 karat gold is soft enough that you could bend a gold case made out of it with your fingers. But 18 or 14 karat gold is, there's only a fraction of the actual metal content is gold.
18 is 75%,
Right.
14 is half or whatever, yeah.
All right.
What else you got?
Let's see. My 4-year-old son has shown an interest in watches. Our condolences. What is a good watch to get him started telling time and appreciating horology?
I think Flick-Flack.
Flick-Flack.
Flick-Flack,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of for a 4-year-old. I think Flick-Flack is pretty much the only choice. I mean, we've seen some
guys
younger
remember
folks.
Watchables?
What's that?
Yes.
Watchables, do you remember those?
Oh yeah.
Our Watchables?
We've seen some younger folks wearing, some quite wonderful watches. But for someone that young, probably best to start them off with a Flick-Flack or a Swatch and and see how it goes.
Or 5970.
Yeah. Which is when you started out.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, at the age of 4. All right. I think that's our show for the week. And obviously, we did not get to even a significant fraction of everybody's questions, but we are going to watch them very closely. And a huge thank you from all of us to everyone who answered. I have to say, honestly, the response to our asking you guys to ask us anything was unbelievable. And we're going to try to get to as many of your questions as we possibly can. So thank you for helping make this episode possible.
Yeah, and if I could, before we end, I want to give 2 personal shout-outs today. The first of which goes to a very young and charming man named Max Levinson. He's a 13-year-old boy that visited us in the office last week? Yeah. Last week. And he just won the hearts of everybody in the office, and he's just been this amazing kind of like shining light in our collective lives for the past week or 2. So shout out to Max. Hey, Max.
Hey, Max.
Hey, Max.
There he is. And the other one goes out to somebody who's actually leaving us at Hodinkee today. His name is Caleb Davenport. You guys might not know, but Hodinkee is actually much larger than the editorial team, and Caleb has been an amazing part of our family for about 2 or 3 years now. Today is his last day. He's going to sell some fruit on the West Coast, and we wish him the best. So thank you, Caleb.
Thank you, Caleb. And we'll see you all next week for episode 16 of Friday.